All right, guys, let's talk more industry-shaking moves with the new announcement that Wizards of the Coast, aka Dungeons and Dragons, will be purchasing DnD Beyond, or at this point they already have. The reason we want to talk about this is because it has some major implications, and depending on which team you are currently on or a fan of, whether that's either the D&D 5e system or another system like Pathfinder, Savage Worlds, Call of Cthulhu, or other RPG systems, this is either fantastic, wonderful, incredible, great news, or maybe not so great. A few years ago now, I made a video on D&D Beyond and their big perception problem. And if you haven't seen that video, it is worth the watch, if I do say so myself. Not to mention, you get to see me looking pretty fly in a suit. In that video, I break down the supply chain of manufacturers and distributors, factories and end users, and I lay out why we would never see the one thing that many fans of D&D have been clamoring for years: codes in their D&D books. This is the one thing that most Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeon Masters, and D&D players are the most interested in, right? But it was never, ever going to happen. However, all of that may change soon. If you've been sleeping under a rock, a few weeks ago now, we found out that D&D Beyond has in fact been sold to Hasbro, aka Wizards of the Coast. But this journey in and of itself was one that very few people saw coming several years back, mostly because of the simple fact that D&D Beyond was owned by Twitch, which of course is owned by Amazon. And I don't want to mislead you guys here with disinformation, but I believe at that time, at least, Amazon had never in their history sold a company off once they had acquired and purchased them. And to my knowledge, again, I don't want to be telling tales here, but I believe that D&D Beyond was one of the first to get sold off, or maybe the first outright in the Amazon's history. Well, after D&D Beyond became independent again, it opened up the door now for Wizards to swoop in, uniting the D&D Beyond brand with Dungeons and Dragons officially. So what does this mean? What does it mean? Well, if you're firmly Team 5e and that's all you ever want to play of all time ever, I think this leads to one very specific place. Eventually, perhaps even with 5.5 on the horizon, we will see D&D Beyond codes in the paperback books. The timing, guys, the timing of all the moving parts here just seems to be pointing in one direction. First off, as a fan of Warhammer 40K, Games Workshop has recently, as in sometime over the last 12 months even, made the exact same move with their own app. So the precedent is there recently from a massive gaming company worth billions. You buy the codex for your army and you take the code in the back of the book over to the app, and shazam, you now unlock that very specific content. And they also have a paid subscription to continue to unlock further additional army building features, which sounds a lot like how D&D Beyond has been trying for years to find added value to get people to subscribe to that small monthly fee. Secondly, we know that 5.5 is on the horizon, right? So what better time than to say, okay, let's give the people a reason to repurchase the Monster Manual and the PHP, and hell, we'll make it a box set with the DMG so we can move that book too. And while it would have been odd, right, to try and include codes for the reprints of just 5e, excluding all of those previous customers, myself included, now, guys, now we have an excuse where they'll need new books anyways, right? So why don't we just start right here, all nice and neatly together? Thirdly, and this is the part that I think will be the biggest double-edged sword here, is that we've seen D&D Beyond expand and expand its capabilities with character sheets and dice rolling and built-in macros, and it's become so much more robust than just an online PDF. We've even seen Google Chrome extensions now to allow people to combine Roll20 and D&D Beyond. But what comes next? Well, it's obvious. D&D Beyond is certainly positioning itself for a market takeover of the VTT space, the virtual tabletop space. I've heard for years now that D&D Beyond was working on a true blue virtual tabletop experience. It hasn't exactly been a secret. Couple that with a simple fact that in the business world, no one, and I mean no one, buys a company just to run it exactly like it had been ran before. No one spends all that money and thinks, well, we'll just let it stay status quo. It doesn't happen. You buy a company because you want to progress it forward and make your own changes. Well, I'm not sure what else would make more sense than the perfection of a new edition, a new VTT launch with codes in books to keep retailers happy now, leading to stocked shelves and dominance in that retail space on their showroom floors, with a new subscription for said VTT for those extra features and storage, and all streamlined to dump the money all in one lap. Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, not to mention directly advertising and now marketing to your own consumer base every single time that they now log in to play a game with your coolest, newest book that's coming out. And as an end user, how much easier can it get, right? Buy the book locally. Take it online immediately with your friends without having to repurchase anything or buy anything else a second time. Sounds like a dream. COVID's surging again? Take your game online seamlessly for a month or two and then right back to meeting in person. Hell, have your buddies come over with their laptops now, smartphones and tablets, and just run everything digitally with their own subscriptions with your character sheets and dice roll calculations, even while you guys are playing in person. And guys, I gotta fully admit, if you are purely Team Wizards in D&D 5e, this is, it's nice. It's really, really nice. There's really no other way to look at it. However, there is a double-edged sword to this, and that sword is why I wanted to leave you guys with just a hint of caution, right? Because this is great for Wizards, there's no doubt, but it's going to make it much, much more difficult on literally everything else. Imagine, if you would, for just a moment, just a brief moment, the other tabletop role-playing games that you guys have heard of. Where did you hear about them, right? How did you discover them? Was it word of mouth from a friend? Maybe. A book you saw on a shelf at a local friendly gaming store? Possibly. Or maybe it was while even browsing all the different character sheets on your current favorite VTT. Or maybe it's that advertisement on Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds that a new Pathfinder book has dropped or a new Star Wars book has dropped. Maybe it was on the forums of that favorite VTT with someone else looking for a group. Maybe it was just in a Discord channel. I am always for more competition, and I think competition inherently breeds a better user experience for us. I think that we get more innovation and crazy ideas that otherwise may not have come to fruition. I love 5e, but I hate that 5e is dominating the market so much that some people tell me that they can't even find players for other games, especially because we live in a world of online RPGs now, right? It's literally never been easier to find a group for those obscure games than it is right now today. And I'm really wary of what a future of pulling people off of Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, Foundry might look like if everyone is just over on DnD Beyond on their favorite VTT. Learning a VTT it's a lot of work and time and investment. If DnD Beyond pulls 20% of all the other platforms, 30%, 50% of its users over to one big red ampersand platform, I don't think that that's particularly great for trying to grow the user base of Tormenta, of World of Darkness, or Edge of the Empire, or Soulbound. And guys, what about Kickstarters? What about Kickstarters? If a Kobold Press Kickstarter can sell its book on Foundry or Fantasy Grounds, what about a potential D&D Beyond virtual tabletop? Are they going to just now open up D&D Beyond for everybody, all the third-party content? Guys, can you imagine for just a moment Paizo, who has recently announced, right? They've recently announced that they're going into the 5e space, trying to get their 5e Adventure Pass now on D&D Beyond's marketplace. The irony of that, after Paizo's website used to sell Dungeons & Dragons PDFs until they were instructed by Wizards to stop in 2009, which, just so happens to be when Pathfinder First Edition was published in August of 2009. The absolute irony. So I get that if you're a fan of 5e, really only good things can come from this acquisition, and those things that we thought in the past were true may not be true anymore. VTT or even codes and books, nothing is going to get worse for you. At a minimum, it's a wash, right? But the downside to the rest of the industry, if what looks to be setting up right in front of our eyes happens, I mean, man, it's going to take a lot of work from all of us to keep those other games alive and growing. And we need to make sure that those other games stay as healthy as possible. I know that a lot of my viewers, a lot of you guys aren't in the RPG industry, right? This isn't something that you guys do for work. But imagine for a moment, the bigger that 5e gets, the bigger that big red ampersand gets, the smaller the competition gets for other artists, other map makers, other writers, other content creators. Everything just boils down to either you're under the red ampersand or not. And if that really does come to fruition, I don't see it being healthy for tabletop role-playing games moving forward in 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years from now. Okay, so now I want to pass it over to you guys in the community, because here's what I want to know. How likely would a D&D Beyond virtual tabletop compete for your dollars? Is it something that you would be interested in? Are you too invested in Roll20, in Fantasy Grounds, in whatever? Do you guys have D&D Beyond books? I mean, a lot of you guys have subscriptions and books to D&D Beyond now. Are you double paying for D&D Beyond and Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or Foundry? And this would be nothing but good news for you, because you would just port everything over. I also want to know if you guys play multiple systems, because some people do. I don't think it's a huge chunk of the community, but like, how would you feel with moving over to D&D Beyond if you're already heavily invested over there and still playing Star Wars over on Roll20? I really want to know what you guys think about this. Let me know in the comments down below. I really look forward to reading what you guys have to say. If this is your first time here and you love role-playing games as much as I do, I would love to have you subscribe. I put out videos on GM tips, player tips, tutorials, and more stuff like this. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, just hit the subscribe button down below and come join us. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Cody, and may your games be filled with awesome memories and even better friends. I'll catch you guys next time.